Not for long with me, don't worry about that. Good stuff. Well, let me tell you, this is my first time in Chicago, and I am so excited to be speaking with all of you today. So my goal for our 90-some-odd minutes together this afternoon is I want all of you to really walk away with actionable and very tangible insights and action items that you can then share with your accounts, your practices, so they can really become leaders in their market and really excel in marketing their procedures that leverage the Allergan portfolio. So the title of my presentation today, and it's a long one, is How Clinics Can Really Thrive, Leverage Today's Social Media Secrets, and Never Compete on Price Again. Sound like something you might want a little bit of for your accounts? Yes? Cool, let's get started. So quick question to get us get the ball rolling. How many of you follow me on LinkedIn, Instagram, have seen my articles? Okay, cool. And how many of you, show of hands, have no clue who I am right now? Phenomenal. Well, I'm excited to be speaking for all of you today. So my name is Adam Haroon. As Mike so kindly introduced, I'm the founder and managing director at Branding MD. We are a strategic brand agency that works exclusively in the aesthetic space, and I have the privilege for speaking for a lot of different companies, Allergan being by far my favorite. I speak at conferences all around the world about branding aesthetic practices, so I'm really more than anything an advocate for the individual physician, the individual provider, all of your key accounts. And again, I'm Canadian, but I split my time between our Toronto office and my office in Las Vegas, so I'm always on a plane somewhere. Cool. So a few kind of best practices to really help all of you make the most of our time together today is I really want this not to be me talking at you. I want this to be a conversation. I want it to be a discussion. I joke, I am not Netflix, I am not Hulu, right? You can engage with me, you can ask me questions. So please, if there's something you want me to repeat or dive into in more detail or say again more slowly, I know I talk quickly, don't hesitate to let me know. And look for your gems of wisdom, right? As I'm going through my content today, I would love for all of you to start thinking about your key accounts and what can you go back on Wednesday morning and email them or tell them that you know is going to add value to them and make a difference in their practice. So look for those gems of wisdom in my presentation today. And one thing I always say is let's steer clear of the idea cemetery, right? We're going to talk about a lot of things today. You're going to get a lot of wisdom today, but let's make sure we help your accounts actually implement that so these ideas don't just stay in our minds. Sound good? Yes. Love it. So when we think of, what do we want to do first with your marketing? What do we really want to implement as a priority, right? You, your providers, your practice managers, myself, we all have a ton of different things on our to-do list. Are all of those things of equal priority? Not necessarily, right? So whenever you look at a provider or an account's to-do list and what they're looking to implement, both with your products and in their practice at large, I would encourage you to have them think in this kind of lens of what is an ideal focus area. And what I mean by that is what can they implement relatively quickly that's going to also really help them see a big change in the way they're operating their practice, right? There's ideal focus areas, then there's those little things we do that make incremental change, right? Quick wins, those are great, we want to implement those too. Then there's things that require strategic planning, right? Like opening a second location or putting a new website together, all of that, right? Those are great things and they make a big difference, but again, it's a longer lead time, they take more strategic planning. And then there's things that will take a lot of planning and make incremental change, and I would encourage you to aim to avoid those with your accounts, right? Redoing your lobby of a practice, a new EMR, that's all great, incremental change, yes, but it's not going to make a big difference right away. So for now, in the context of marketing and implementation, I would encourage you to avoid those things. So let's talk a little bit, and I want to open our conversation with a question, with a show of hands. How many of you would say the aesthetic space is crowded and becoming more crowded? Yeah, totally. So I want to give you all a stat on just how crowded it is. This is a stat from the ASDS. 50% of patients in their annual customer survey and their annual patient survey actually determined that price was their #1 criteria when they're seeking out aesthetic procedures, right? Not the credentials of the provider, not the product used, not the location of the practice, price, right? We've kind of found ourselves in a situation now where people are almost more particular about who is doing their hair than who is doing their aesthetic treatments, right? If people are getting their hair done, they want to look on Yelp at reviews. They want to see, what does their Instagram look like? They want to ask their friends, all of this, right? But if they see a sandwich board or a radio ad or a billboard for some, other company's lousy toxin for like $6, $7, $8 a unit, happy days, let's run and go do it, right? They don't ask questions. Am I lying, right? It's crazy. So how did we get into this situation in the aesthetic space? I think there's really kind of a few factors that we can touch on really quickly just to understand how this came to be. So first and foremost is what I call just the growth of this industry, right? The fact aesthetic treatments, compared to 10 or even 5 years ago, are now much less taboo, right? It's that Kardashian effect, right? People are posting up as they're getting their lips done on Instagram, right? So with that rise in demand, a lot of providers, many for better, some for worse, want a piece of the action, want a piece of the opportunity in this market, right? So it's just a much more crowded space due to the fact we're going mainstream, right? The second reason, and those of you who work with more established accounts might see a little bit of this, is what I call complacency among providers, right? 10, 15 years ago, you could put up a pretty mediocre website, do a little bit of social media posting, maybe a radio ad, and you had patients clamoring to come see you, right? That's not the situation we find ourselves in anymore, right? Good is no longer good enough when it comes to marketing your aesthetic practice, right? So that's another reason we've become so commoditized. And third, and bless your hearts, vendor-provided marketing collateral, right? You guys do a great job at Allergan with giving resources and brochures and handouts to your patients, and those are an excellent resource, but you can't end with that on the practice level, right? So they need to, your practices really take what you're bringing them in terms of marketing collateral and build on that, right? Because if I'm a patient and I get the exact same Botox cosmetic brochure at 5 practices and the exact same set of marketing collateral, who am I going to know to go to, right? So relying on vendor-provided marketing collateral alone, I think, is another really big reason we've become so commoditized. So with that in mind, we're going to revisit that throughout the context of today's conversation. But another thing I want to share with you are just some statistics about what's happening with the global consumer base as an aggregate right now. And then I'm going to help you understand why it matters to your practice, right? So how many of you are familiar with McKinsey, the global consulting firm? You guys know that name? Yep. So in their most recent global consumer survey, they found that consumers are either trading up or trading down. And I'm going to explain what that means, right? Trading up is where a consumer chooses to splurge in a certain category, and trading down, that's where someone who before might have been buying a brand product like Kraft macaroni and cheese, for example, they're now buying the store brand. They're buying the private label, right? They're trying to economize in every way they can to make the most of their income, right? So that's kind of developed 3 sets of consumers I want to talk to you about. So the first is what we call survivalists. Survivalists are these consumers who are really just trying to make the most of the limited resources that they have. They're buying the store label, right? They might have downgraded their gym membership, right? Maybe they lived in a 2-bedroom apartment before and now they're in a 1-bedroom, right? These are those people who are really just trying to make the most of what they have and make ends meet. So those we call survivalists. Then we have selectionists. Those are those people that will economize in certain market categories, but they'll choose to splurge in others, right? And I'm going to revisit that in a second. These are called selectionists. And then we have the hybrid consumer. And you guys, I'm one of these. You may find yourself and the patients you see coming into your accounts, these kind of consumers as well. These are people who will actually splurge and save at the same time, right? So it's someone who might wear a Chanel handbag, but with an H&M dress, right? It's someone who might take a Southwest Airlines flight to go to a vacation at the Ritz-Carlton. Does that sound like anyone you know? Yeah. Totally. I'm one of those people. Love me a good Spirit Airlines flight. Bring my own water, though. So keeping that in mind, right, 69% of consumers in this same McKinsey survey, those consumers who are trading down in market categories, they're not going back, right? So you see a lot of companies in different industries really struggling because they've lost that brand loyalty. Consumer packaged goods being one of these industries, right? This is why you see $10 a month gyms booming, right? This is why you see Dollar Tree, Family Dollar, Dollar General opening on like every corner, right? They're really capitalizing on these consumers who have traded down. So that's one thing to be aware of. The good news for all of us is that cosmetics are actually the category where consumers are most willing to trade up, along with organic produce and wine. But for us, we're more interested in the cosmetics category. So why am I telling you all of this? Why does this matter to your practice? How many of you work with accounts and they say something to the effect of, oh, we're not the cheapest, definitely not, but we don't want to be the most expensive either. Or, our prices are kind of in the middle. How many of you have accounts that say things like that? So that's actually a really dangerous place to be given today's market conditions, because consumers are either trading down or trading up. The middle market in our industry and many others is kind of falling away, right? So I always advise practices. You can either choose to be a premier provider with premium prices, which is my personal preference, or you can choose to be a low price, high volume practice. Both of those models work, but those practices in either one of those segments are going to do much better moving forward than those practices that are kind of just idly floating in the middle of the market. Does this make sense? Cool. So I want this to frame the rest of our conversation today as well. So just to give you some inspiration of some industries where you can look to see what their marketing looks like, as well as what they're doing to really adapt to changing conditions of the global consumer marketplace, look at retail and e-commerce, right? They're usually the fastest to either be impacted or adapt to the changes we see with consumers. Travel and hospitality is another really big industry to look at. Beauty and cosmetics, in the sense of, Sephora, Ulta Beauty, things like that. And FMCG, that's fast-moving consumer goods. This is, your Pantene shampoos. This is your Kraft macaroni and cheese, right? Things you would find at the shelves of any mass retailer. So just some places you want to find inspiration when it comes to, marketing and really what's happening with consumer trends right now. So all of that said, we know the middle market is dying. Right? How do we position your accounts as prestige practices with premium pricing, right? How do we avoid competing on price? So how I really love to introduce this conversation is, let's look at some, commoditized products, right? We've got a cup of coffee, we've got a polo shirt, and we've got a glass of water, right? So if you get a cup of coffee, at some random coffee shop, a Dunkin' Donuts, what have you, that's maybe $1 or $2, right? If you get a polo shirt from Macy's, right, it might be $50 or $60. And I mean, water, I've got some right here on my podium. Water is pretty much free, right? So these are very commoditized products. But when we bring a brand into the picture, all of a sudden, that pricing conversation changes substantially, right? That $1 or $2 cup of coffee at Starbucks is now, $5, $6, maybe more if you're getting really fancy with it, right? That polo shirt, if you add a Nike check mark, or my personal favorite, the Lacoste alligator, right, to that same shirt, that's now selling for $100, $150, $200 for essentially the same good. And water is my favorite example of branding at play in a commoditized market, right? You go to any supermarket, they have an entire aisle of different water brands, and they all sell well, right? Now, yes, there may be a bit of a different taste or what have you, but ultimately it's the same good, right? And as a consumer, I'm the biggest sucker for this, like all of you, right? If I order sparkling water and they're like, oh, we have this, I'm like, oh, it's not San Pellegrino? No, we're good, just still, fine, just go with still, right? So we all buy into this as consumers, right? So when you become a brand, when all of your practices become a brand, it really helps us take that pricing conversation off the table and build patient loyalty, because ultimately patients are going for something more than the price, right? If we all only shopped on price, we would all be driving, Kia hatchbacks from 20 years ago and living in studio apartments, right? And that's not the case. So as consumers, there's much more than price that goes into a buying decision. So on this whole topic of brands versus commodities, I'm just going to go here for 3 minutes and talk about the elephant in the room. So there's a new toxin in town, right? Everyone's talking about it. Doctors are being passed out, all this product like free Halloween candy. And, it's something that, maybe some of you have been thinking about. Maybe it's a conversation that you've had to really have with a number of your accounts. Would you say that's kind of happening for some of you right now? Totally. So here's the thing. Yes, in the world of neurotoxins, it's a new situation where we have a new entrant coming in with such force. But this is really nothing new in marketing in general, right? I want to take a little trip back down memory lane to the 90s when personal computers were first coming out, right? Do you guys remember? It was IBM and Dell from the outset, right? And then all of these random companies from who knows where doing who knows what came in and started offering these like super cheap personal computers. Does anyone remember that? Yeah, so what do I have an ad for here? Micron. Who remembers Micron computers? Who has a Micron computer today? Nobody, right? We all have IBMs in our offices. Many of you probably have Dell personal computers and laptops, right? So yes, there is competition happening. But ultimately, when you build brand equity, your product can withstand the test of time, right? Dell and IBM are both still here today and well-regarded brands, right? In the world of neurotoxins, there is no one with as much clinical trials and evidence and really, quality behind it. There is no one with the brand recognition and no one with the reputation that parallels or even comes close to Botox Cosmetic, right? Even this other toxin's whole new tox hashtag and campaign, the only way that product is even relevant is because they are referencing and continuously comparing themselves to Botox Cosmetic, right? So, I live in Vegas. I'm a betting man on occasion. If I was to pick a toxin, I think you're all in the right space right now. So, just wanted to address that really, really quickly. Does that make sense? Cool. And I would have that same conversation with your customers, right? Because, sure, is their margin maybe a little better on a cheaper product? In theory, yes. But what if that patient gets mediocre results and isn't happy and goes somewhere else and you lose that loyalty, right? Was it really worth saving that few dollars to really, make your margin higher? Probably not, right? So why would you veer from anything but the very best product? That's just my take on it as an industry observer. So anyways, so let's talk about this whole thing I call the disconnect in our industry. And I would love to know if this is kind of relevant to any of you. So here's what I see happening, and it has been happening for some time now, right? We get these providers who are exceptional in their craft. They care about their patients. Their outcome is their outcomes are outstanding, and they really do have that patient's best interest at heart. But they're either not well versed in marketing, they're not comfortable in marketing, or maybe they think because they're good, they don't need to market, right? You see that with a lot of your more established plastics, right? So these providers, despite the fact they do excellent work, they kind of get lost in the fray, right? They kind of get drowned out with the noise in this industry. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you have either these medical spas or these physicians who may not have the patient's best interests at heart, but they are very, very good marketers, right? So they have the ad spend. They get the funding from the VCs. They are doing all the ads all over the place. They're who patients go to end up dissatisfied at best and with some very bad complications at worst, right? So it's this disconnect where we have great providers with lousy marketing and lousy providers with some really great marketing. Does that sound like any of your practices or practices that you encounter in your day-to-day work? Yeah. So that's what I'm here to remedy, right? We want great providers to have great marketing. That's what we're aiming for here, and that's what I really want to share with all of you today. So it's all about branding, right? Like I've been talking about for the past couple minutes. So just to define a brand, right? Actually, I'm going to go back, don't cheat. Show of hands, or if anyone wants to shout it out. How would you define a brand off the top of your head?
What you're known for.
What you're known for? Signature. Great. Outcome, persona. Great start. Anyone else? Your look. Quality. Perfect. These are great answers. So I'm so glad no one said your logo. That's only the tip of the iceberg, right? That's what I usually get. So how we want to define a brand is how prospective and existing patients see, perceive, and experience your practice, right? Think of it as that real estate you own in the mind of a patient, right? Everything from the way their reception team answers their phone, to the way their practice is decorated, to, of course, their patient outcomes, to the words they're using in their conversations with patient. Every engagement they have with a patient, no matter how minute or how substantial, those all play into your brand, right? I'll give you my favorite example because this company has absolutely mastered it. Disney. Disney has put intention into every facet of their brand, right? Like, can you imagine if you, and we're going to talk about them a little bit later, I think. Can you imagine if you called up Disney to book a vacation and they just kind of answered the phone like, welcome to Disney, happiest place on earth. You want to book a trip or what, right? That would never happen, right? Their brand is all about childhood magic. It's all about happiness, right? So they have taken every element down to, how many of you have been to Disney World in Florida, Disneyland? All those lampposts, they have a whole system of how frequently they paint those, so customers and visitors never see a dingy-looking lamppost, right? They have thought of the most minute detail because they know all of that reinforces their brand's promise, and ultimately they never know what a visitor is going to see and observe, so they make sure everything is done with intent. Your practices need to be thinking about their brands the same way, right? Everything from how their website looks to how they answer an inquiry, all the way through to how they treat that last patient follow-up. It all builds their brand. So just to give you a really quick kind of overview of why branding is so important, as you can tell I'm a bit of an advocate for this. So the first is it reduces perceived risk, right? To give you an example, if I fly into a new country and I don't speak the local language and I haven't really had a chance to scope out, where's a good spot to grab lunch or something, and I see the Golden Arches, odds are I'm going to go to McDonald's. Why? Because I know what my meal is going to cost me, what it's going to taste like to a certain extent, how long it's going to take me to receive service, right? The quality of the food. I know what I'm in for, right? An established brand reduces perceived risk. That's one really big benefit. The second benefit is more and passionate referrals. How many of you in this room are Apple people? Apple phone, Apple computer, Apple watch, Apple everything, right? Apple is I'm not one of you, by the way, but more power to you. Apple is almost a religion in the sense that, every fall, without fail, people line up around the corner at the Apple store to get pretty much the same phone they already have, right? But Apple has really built their customers into brand advocates. Everyone loves talking about their Apple phone and their iCloud and all of this, right? Apple has built a brand that has really turned their customers into people who send them more and more passionate referrals. So that's another really big benefit of branding. The third is elevating your profile. So with your accounts, you might have some who want to try and become that celebrity surgeon, and that's certainly, one element of how you can elevate your profile. But more than that, I mean by elevating your profile, you are known for something in your regional marketplace, right? You can boldly stake a claim in your market, and you're not just another, Dr. XYZ, right? You have a claim in the marketplace. A brand helps you elevate your profile. Fourth is attracting the patients you want, right? So this is kind of two-sided, and it's a beautiful thing, because not only does a good brand help you attract the patients you want, it'll help you repel the patients you don't want, right? How many of you know the brand Equinox Fitness? They've been in the news recently. Yeah. Yep. And how many of you know the brand Blink Fitness, the $10 a month gym? Okay, so just to give you some context, they're not as well known. They're bigger in New York. They're owned by the same company, literally the exact same equipment in their gym. The consumer who walks into an Equinox Fitness is going to be much different than the customer who walks into a Blink Fitness, right? Equinox is the prime example of a brand to attract the patients or consumers you want, right? And Equinox Fitness, they aren't just selling fitness. They're selling a whole lifestyle, a whole experience, and that's why they're dinging people for $200 a month, right? Just for a gym membership. Right? They know what their brand is selling, and they are shameless about it. They don't mind. They're trying to attract the price shopper. They aren't trying to attract the person looking, just to work out occasionally, right? That's not for them. So a well-established brand can help your practices attract the patients they want and repel the patients they don't. Practice valuation is another big one, right? How many of you work with accounts that are in the near to mid-term looking to either sell or transition the practice? Anyone in this room? Few of you. So when it comes time to do that, if they have strong intellectual property in place, aka a brand, the valuation they're going to get for that practice when it comes time to sell or transition is going to be much higher than if their brand kind of just happened haphazardly, right? So for those practices in that phase of their trajectory, it's a really key insight. And of course, status, right? I see lots of lovely handbags in this room, lots of lovely belts and accessories. There is something to be said for status that comes with a really developed and really accomplished brand. So some really big benefits, really thinking about this can bring to your account. Make sense so far? Everybody with me? Yeah. Awesome. So I just want to talk really quickly about what goes into a brand. There's 3 elements you can consider, right? The first is strategy. The second is messaging. And the third is visual identity. So I want to walk you through all of those. Strategy, this is where we always start, right? This is your brand promise, right? What is the one thing that each of your practices wants to make a claim of? No matter who the patient is or what the procedure they come in for, they can offer this one thing every single time to the patient, right? I'm going to give you some examples of some really strong brand promises. When I say safest cars on the road, you say Volvo. Yeah, When I say package delivered on time, what do you think of? FedEx. Yep. Wait, in theory. And when I say coffee, what do you think of? Starbucks, right? These are all brands that have created really strong brand promises. We want each of your practices to do the same. Positioning, that is essentially how is each of your practices different than their competitors, and we're going to talk about that again in a few minutes. And personality, right? What is the personality of this practice? Some practices are much more aspirational. Some are much more relatable and friendly, right? There's not any one right or wrong personality for a practice to have, but they need to know this when they're developing the strategy for their brand. From there, we really look at messaging, right? How are we telling patients about what we have to offer, right? What is our slogan or tagline? What are the words we're using on our website, when we're on the phone with a prospective patient, when we're in the consultation room? What are we actually saying? That's messaging. And visual identity at the tip of the iceberg, because it builds on the other two. Visual identity is your logo, it's your brochures, it's your website, it's the look of the actual practice itself. How does that reflect and reinforce our brand's messaging? And how does that reflect and reinforce our brand strategy? And please, I'm sure you're all just as sick of it as I am. If I see another practice with a silhouette as their logo, or a butterfly, or a lotus flower, I don't even know, guys. It's so overused, it's lost meaning, right? The patient doesn't even register that anymore because they see so much of it, right? And when we talk about messaging, if I hear where science meets beauty or be the best you, if I hear that again, I will probably go smash my head into that wall over there, right? What does that even mean anymore, right? It's so overused that it's lost meaning, right? So we really want to help your accounts take a really close look at what makes their brand different. Does this make sense? Yeah. Any questions so far? Cool. Absolutely.
When you said there was the trending up versus the trending down,
yep.
What do you equate that to?
I just think that, frankly, people's spending power is going down, right? That people's incomes aren't going as far as they used to, right? So people have to maximize. And every consumer is going to have their own set of values, right? Some people care more about family vacations. Some care more about eating quality food. Some care about their appearance and their wardrobe. So I think each consumer's values are different, and based on those values, they're trying to make the most of what resources they have. Does that help?
Yeah.
Cool. Anyone else? Great. So another thing on branding, and this is a really good thing to share with your accounts, kind of the 3 C's they want to talk about and think about with their staff are clarity, consistency, and constancy. And I'm going to walk you through all of those. So clarity, all this really means is your practices are clear on what they do, who they do it for, and what makes them different. That's clarity, right? And this is where a lot of practices struggle sometimes, and why you see their marketing is really disjointed, because they've never actually gotten clarity about what they're offering. We're going to talk more about that in a bit. So clarity is the first C of a strong brand. The second is consistency. And we can really look at consistency in 2 ways. So the first is in terms of, obviously, your website should match your brochures, should match your in-practice materials, which should look like your social media, right? I can't tell you how many practices I've walked into, and they've got like a yard sale, as I like to call it, going on, of brochures and collateral, and I just have an anxiety attack looking at that thing, right? There's no consistency in their marketing material. Their website is green, their social media is orange. You would never see an orange bottle of Coca-Cola. It will never happen. It's their signature brand color, right? Clarity in terms of visuals is obviously important, or rather consistency, but consistency also applies to the experience a patient has, right? Whether I'm seeing Jenny at the front desk or Joe at the front desk, whether I'm treated by the physician or by the nurse practitioner, there should be consistency in the patient experience, right? How many of you have clients and accounts where if you look at their online reviews, there's 50 that are 5 stars and they're like, best place ever, I'm so loyal here, I love it, I always see so-and-so, and then they have 50 reviews where it's this was the worst money I ever spent. Do you have any accounts like that? So that's a really big indication that somewhere in their procedure and the way they go about doing things, that practice has an issue with consistency. It's the hardest one to get right, but it's also the most important, and where a lot of practices should really devote their time. And the third is constancy, right? And this, in my mind, relates to how your practices are marketing, right? Instagram is not a marketing plan, okay? Having a Facebook page is not a marketing plan, right? We know as marketers, and depending on what statistic or what expert you reference, a consumer needs to engage with a brand between 17 and 17 times before they even really remember what that company is offering or that practice is offering. So keeping all of that in mind, if your practices are only marketing one way, like through Instagram, it's going to be much harder for them to have constancy, right? We want all of your practices to be what I call omnipresent, right? Yes, they need to be on social media, but they should also be doing things in the community. They should have events, right? They need multiple touch points and multiple marketing avenues to really engage with and get their message to the prospective patient, right? So if your practices are only relying on Instagram, they're failing when it comes to constancy. And unfortunately, I see a lot of that, right? So we're going to talk about social media later, but it's relevant to the context of constancy. Sound like a plan for everyone to make sense? Awesome. So remember how I said I was going to talk more about positioning? Let's do that for a second. 2 words I want all of your practices to stop using right now are discount and free. How many of you have practices using these words? So that completely devalues what your practices are offering. Now, people come up to me sometimes and say, Adam, so do you hate promotions? No, I'm a huge fan of promotions. And I'm a huge fan of really offering price incentives when it's appropriate. And I'm a huge fan of adding value. But we want to change the vocabulary we're using, right? So instead of discount, I want to use the word incentives or savings, right? I'll give you an example. When I think discount, I think Safeway is trying to sell me bananas that are about to turn that night and they want them off the shelf, right? That's what I think of with a discount, right? But when you walk into the Mercedes-Benz dealership, they have a whole range of incentives for you to sign with them right away, right? Free, well, I mean, free is what people do when they have like a moving sale, right? But when I called the front desk yesterday, it's true. When I called the front desk yesterday and I asked for some more Aveda body wash, because like they have Aveda products in the restrooms here, like what? It was complimentary, right? So free, switch that over to complimentary. Discount, saving that, or changing that to savings or incentive. It will make a world of difference, right? Small change in words, huge difference in how it positions your practice, right? We don't ever want your providers devaluing their expertise and getting into this game of price competition, because ultimately, if price is the reason that a patient comes into a practice, guess what? Price is the very same reason they will leave, right? As soon as someone is willing to undercut you. So 2 things to avoid there. Another thing you might want to consider is your practices might want to consider having different offerings for different market segments, right? How many of you, with a show of hands, work with practices that you would say have different types of patients, right? Maybe they have the millennials, but they also have a subset who are, women of a certain age looking to slow down the aging process. Does that sound like any of your practices? Yep. So the way you're going to talk to those 2 patients, even if it's selling the same procedure or the same treatment, that's going to be radically different because they have different motivations. They have different concerns, right? And the way you package that might even be different, right? So we're going to talk more about defining your patients a little bit later, but I want to give you a really cool example of different market segments, right? Again, the water aisle, my personal favorite. So the consumer who's going to buy a bottle of Fiji, and the way that Fiji talks about their product is completely different than someone who's going to buy a bottle of Dasani water, right? It's very, very different, right? Different consumers, different packaging. And I'm so sorry if any of you are drinking Dasani right now, but it's a marketing fact, right? Another example of positioning can actually be seen in the cosmetic industry, right? La Mer. Let's talk about La Mer. We all know it's a very mediocre skincare product, but guess what? They have mastered the art of positioning, and they have mastered the art of marketing a luxury product, right? They have this whole story behind their brand. Oh, the miracle broth from the sea and NASA scientists and all of this, right? When what's actually in that bottle is pretty lousy. But again, people love La Mer. They love the packaging. They love bragging that they've bought La Mer products, right? So they've done a masterful job, probably the best I've ever seen, to be honest with you, of positioning their product as a luxury and marketing it as such. Now, what I have here on the other side, this is the Estee Lauder brand portfolio, right? So they have a whole range of products, many of which are probably quite similar, all designed to target different market segments, right? So they've everything from Smashbox and Glam Glow, which might target a younger consumer, all the way through the Jo Malone fragrances, Tom Ford Beauty, they have Kilian perfume, right? So this is a big business brand concept, but it still applies to your practices. Different positioning, different product ranges for different market segments. Everyone get it? Yep. Awesome. Any questions on that? Great. So one of my favorite examples of positioning, right here from the Allergan portfolio, and I joke about this, but it's true. When I saw the new campaign for the first time on NBC or something, when I was watching the news and the new Juvederm ad came on, I had what I call a brandgasm. Yeah, I don't have them very often, but I had one that day, let me tell you. So you guys are trying to target the millennial market with Juvederm, right? You're looking to position it more for, and really include the younger set. You guys pulled that off in spades. It is phenomenal, right? Let's compare how Juvederm is positioned today in 2019 compared to how it was positioned 5 or 10 years ago with your old campaign, which for the time was an excellent campaign, right? Your old tagline, still one of my favorites in this industry to this day, everyone will notice but nobody will know, right? That leveraged what was at the time a very relevant condition that people were kind of taboo about medical aesthetics, right? The new campaign, flaunt it, right? Work it, all of this, Juvederm it. There is nothing everyone will notice and nobody will know about that, right? So you've repositioned your product, but you've done it masterfully to adapt to changing conditions in the aesthetic marketplace, right? So this is a perfect example of positioning at play, right? Same product, two very different ways to position it, right? So this is just another great example of how powerful and how impactful positioning can be for any product or for any practice when it's done correctly. This is just another really cool example. Last fall, we had the opportunity to travel to Switzerland on a tour for a company in Europe, and we got to go to one of their key accounts, which is Clinique Matignon in Zurich. And what they've, I'm sorry, this is in Lausanne, my mistake. What they've actually done is they've put a little pop-up in what they call Manor, which is like our equivalent of a Neiman Marcus or a Saks, right next to the cosmetic aisle. All people can get there are, I believe, injectables and IPL, and I think that's it. What this does, this introduces people who otherwise might not be open to or comfortable walking into a clinic to the world of medical aesthetics. And then when they want the body contouring, they want the whole range, they go to the practice's main location. But this is a way to really access new market segments and position your services differently for a different market segment, right? Meeting people where they're at. So I haven't seen this in North America. I'm not suggesting your practices do this. I just want to show this to you as a means of inspiration of what can happen when you really get serious about accessing and really targeting and tailoring your offerings for new market segments to reinforce your positioning. So it's pretty cool, right? So here's a question for all of you. How many of you have seen dysfunctional practice teams? Oh, yeah. So here's the thing about dysfunctional practice teams that I've seen. Sometimes you just have lousy people that shouldn't be there. Absolutely. Oftentimes, we also say that people might not just be working in their best capacity, right? So a quote I love is, "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." That's a quote from Helen Keller, who is just such a testament to the human spirit, right? I want to introduce you all to an activity called Unique Ability, and I'm going to walk over to my little whiteboard here. So you guys also have, by the way, you've got all kinds of goodies today. You have a little companion guide, by the way, and this is just some activities to reinforce your learning today, but I am going to refer to it now. So I would love for all of you in your companion guides to go to page, bear with me, wow, I got lots of good stuff here for you guys. Awesome. Okay, let's go to page 21, which conveniently is your last page. Could have just started there. Anyways, so we all have a lot on our to-do lists, like I said earlier, right? Are those all the best things for us or for your practice managers or for your staff in the practices to be doing? Not necessarily. So I'm going to walk you through this quadrant I'm going to help you understand the difference between these 4 capacities, and then I'm going to explain why it matters to your practice teams and how it can be affecting their revenue. So first I want to talk about unique ability. So unique ability, every single one of us has these, right? Unique ability are these things that we do and we love the most about our work, right? They're also the things that we are best at, right? A day of doing this energizes you. You have passion for it. And the more you do this and the more you advance in your career, you continue to get better at it, right? So I'm going to use myself as a really easy example. So for me, I have 2 unique abilities. 2.5, 3. But anyways, that's it. So my unique abilities are speaking. I'm great at strategy and creative for practices. And you could say sales is another one of my unique abilities. So these are the things I love to do the most. I would practically do them for free all day if you wanted me to, but that wouldn't be much of a business now, would it? And the things that the more I do them, the better I get at them. So don't think you or your practice team's members will have a ton. You may only have 1 or 2 or 3 unique abilities. So I would love for all of us to just take a second and write down what you think your unique abilities are. I'm going to walk you guys through this activity so you can then walk your practices through it. Sound good? And I'm sure you all get doctors, well, I'm good at everything. No, you're not. And again, just to remind you guys, unique ability, things you are better at than anyone else on your immediate team, things you're passionate about, things you would practically do for free all day if you could, and the more you do them, the better you get at them. Jotting some stuff down. Anyone want to share what they think one of their unique abilities might be? Anyone want to volunteer? Don't be shy. Yes.
I do think you're a spirit person. I just know you're a spirit person.
I love it.
And the things that you're saying, I'm like, I do this. For me, it's speaking, so vocabulary.
Vocabulary.
Word mastering and relanguaging things.
Yep.
Coaching and engaging others.
Great. Anyone else want to share some unique abilities? Cool. Well, I'm sure you all have them. So that's unique ability. Let's talk a little bit about excellence. And these are similar, but they differ when you understand how they work together. So excellence, these are things that you are very, very good at as well. You may even be known for them, but here's the thing, you're not passionate about them. And frankly, after a day of doing it, you are exhausted, right? So yes, you're very good at them. Yes, you may even be known for them, but you don't necessarily enjoy them, and quite frankly, after a day of doing it, you're quite exhausted. So that's excellence. I'm going to give you mine again, using me as an example. How many of you have read my LinkedIn articles? Yeah, my LinkedIn articles or my book. Can I tell you guys a secret? I hate writing. I really don't like writing, but I'm good at it, right? That's probably my biggest unique ability, area of excellence. So again, excellence, you might be good at it, but you're not passionate about it, and frankly, it kind of exhausts you, and you've kind of peaked, right? You're not getting any better at it. You're just kind of as good as you are, and that's how it's going to be, right? Let's talk about competence. Competence is everyone's favorite because it's those things that they kind of just fall on your plate, right? You can do them, yes, but it's kind of like a left-handed person like myself doing a right-handed person's job, right? So even though you can do it, you will never do it as well or as efficiently as someone who's uniquely gifted in this area, right? So again, competence. These are the things that kind of fall on our plates. Yes, we can do them, but we're not the best at them, nor are we the most efficient. I'll give you some of mine. Like the actual putting together of the marketing plan I do for a client, I can do it, but I'm not the fastest at it, and yeah. I can design graphics. I know, like, I learned that in school when I did marketing, but I mean, I'm real slow at it, right? So again, competence, yeah, you can do them, but think of it again like a right-handed person doing a left-handed person's job or vice versa. You're not the fastest and you're not the most efficient. Who wants to share what might be an area of competence for some of you? Say it again?
Oh, Excel.
Excel? Oh, me and you both, darling, don't you worry. Anyone else? Okay, well, I'm sure many of you have Excel. I have Excel in mine. Actually, let me add that right now. This is something I should delegate. Thank you. And then let's talk about incompetence. These are things that, again, they end up on our plates, but we probably should not be doing them because, frankly, we're not good at them, and we have no interest in getting good at them, right? Bookkeeping, IT, admin, tech. Sound like any of you? Yeah. So here's why all of this matters, right? Remember how I asked you a few minutes ago if you've seen dysfunctional practice teams? Sometimes it might just be they don't have the right people in that team. More often, in my experience, it's that they are putting people into mandates and tasking them with things that are not their unique ability. And here's why that's not a great idea. Because ultimately, when you look at what each staff member does that generates revenue for the practice and actually makes that practice money, 80%, give or take, of each team member's revenue generating activity is going to happen when they're working in their area of unique ability, right? So if we have, Susie, we'll call her. Susie is an amazing esthetician, but the Wi-Fi's down, so she used to spend 2 hours on the line with the phone company and the internet company trying to get this all working. That's actually costing the practice money, right? Because she is not working in that area that she's best at and where she actually brings revenue into the practice, her areas of unique ability, right? That means that not only is she not bringing revenue into the practice, but when she's not in her area of unique ability, the practice patient experience is also suffering because people are doing things they're not great at, and a patient can always tell, right? So sometimes when a practice asks, we're growing, who do we hire next? Walk them through this activity and see what commonalities show up in these areas. Because if you see a bunch of people are having trouble with, website management, maybe they want to hire a webmaster as an example, right? Our goal here is over time, and this is, planet Earth, nothing is ever perfect, right? We're still always working on this even in my own business. We want to delegate and build a practice team such that eventually people are no longer working in their areas of incompetence, they're no longer working in their areas of competence. Most of them shouldn't be spending too much time in excellence, and they're all focused on their area of unique ability, so they can ultimately do what brings a practice more money. They're actually generating revenue, everyone is happier, and the patient experience is optimized. Does that make sense? Is this an activity that some of your practices should probably have done a long time ago? Yep.
I have a question.
Absolutely.
So you've done this, obviously, with practices.
Yes.
Are they able to realize what their abilities are in excellence? I mean, how do you coach?
Usually when I'm brought on board to do this with a practice, I'll have them, jot down to the best of their ability everything they do every hour for a week before I come in. So I say, okay, pull open your laundry lists. Now let's start categorizing them. Unfortunately, I don't have that kind of time with you all today. But usually I have them do that pre-work so I can say, let's actually look at what you've done for the past week. How much of that was in your area of unique ability and how much of that should have been delegated or outsourced or automated such that you're able to focus on the revenue generating part. Yeah. Any other questions? Awesome. So that's a little bit on how practice teams can work more effectively. I just think that's a really important activity because the more practices I go to, the more I see dysfunctional teams, and I wanted to impart all of you with that wisdom. So another thing I'm really passionate about is this whole idea that practices need to recognize that ultimately they are selling value, right? So the way I like to look at this is every procedure, every treatment that your practices offer, it has a price point, of course, right? It also has a value in the mind of that buyer, right? The difference between what the benefit is to a prospective patient in their mind and how they see the price point, that's the value, right? You can think of it like this. This goes to the whole idea that we are not just selling neurotoxin. We are not just selling CO2 laser. We are not just selling liposuction or anything that your providers offer. We are selling an outcome, right? I think most providers don't realize this, and that's why they get caught up in this trap of competing on price, all of this, right? I mean, heck, if we were all just buying neurotoxin, we could just go to AliExpress and find some really sketchy product from China and inject it ourselves. Heaven help us, right? Your providers are selling so much more than that, right? They are selling an outcome, right? And we really want to make sure not only are they selling an outcome, but they're selling the best possible outcome using best-in-class products, which is the Allergan portfolio, right? I'm going on a cruise later this year. I am not buying the 2-hour wait to check in at the pier. I am not buying being nickel and dimed every time I want a drink. I am not buying any of that. I am buying the outcome, which is a week to relax, right? So likewise, when I got my ticket here, right, from Toronto to Chicago, I did not care about what credential, well, let me take it back. I did not care about whether it was a Boeing or an Airbus. I did not care how many engines the plane had. I just wanted to know that I was going to get from point A to point B safely, right? Patients are ultimately buying outcomes, right? Think of it almost like what I call the benefit gap, right? There is where the patient comes to you when they make that inquiry, right? How they look, how they're feeling about themselves. And then there is their desired outcome, right? Maybe it's someone who's really self-conscious about acne scars, right? Maybe it's someone who's constantly getting told they look tired and they feel really self-conscious about it, right? Whatever the case happens to be, there's a gap between where a patient's appearance is when they first call a practice and where they want to be after their last treatment. That difference is ultimately the value to the buyer, right? So in your practice's messaging, in how they're talking about their treatments and their services, they should not just be thinking, oh, we offer Botox Cosmetic, or we offer Kybella, or we offer, Juvederm. What outcome are we offering people, right? We want to sell outcomes. And let me give you another really cool example of this. So bear with me. Okay, there we go. So if I were to go to a restaurant and I order a bowl of soup, right? Some drawing, but you get the idea. That bowl of soup might cost me, what, $9, let's say? But let's actually take a step back and look at what goes into that soup, right? So maybe there's some carrots, maybe there's a tomato, maybe there's some soup stock or some broth. All these ingredients only cost me $2. So what justifies a $9 price point on soup with $2 ingredients? It's the value, right? It's the chef's technique. It's the presentation of the final product, right? It's the credentials of the person preparing that meal. It's really their approach. That is value. Does this illustration make sense? Cool. Now to find my clicker. Thank you. I am blind as a bat. Thank you, darling. So another thing I want to talk about is how many of you have, by the way, is this helpful? Yeah, would this help your practices get out of price competition? Right? And all of a sudden they're not competing on, oh, well, this other toxin is cheaper, right? You're not just selling toxin. You're selling the value that accompanies the application of that toxin using a best-in-class product. How many of you have seen practices, maybe you see them a couple times, right? One, let's say in January, they've got one marketing company, and then you see them in March and yeah, it didn't work. We hired another company. And then they hired that other company, and you see them in June, they're like, yeah, that didn't work either. Marketers are scammers. How many of you have seen practices like that? So I'm going to explain to you what's actually happening there and why so many practices marketing does not work. So how many of you in the room are art aficionados? Anyone? Does anyone recognize these paintings? Love it. So on the left, we have the London Fog by Monet. On the right, we have a Mondrian. So the London Fog, this to me is how so many practices go about their marketing, right? Yeah, you can kind of see what's happening, but it's pretty hazy. There's no real structure to it. It looks not bad from a distance, but when you really take a good look at it, it's kind of really blurry and disjointed, right? That is how most practices go about their marketing, right? A lot of practices are doing stuff, right? They see the practice across town is on Snapchat, so they need to be on Snapchat, right? They saw this other practice in LA has a great referral program, so they tried to copy that, right? Oh, and the holidays are coming up, so we got to be doing these open house events, right? But there's no rhyme and reason to any of their marketing activities. Does that make sense? What we want to aim for, and I'm going to illustrate this for you in detail in a moment, we want to aim for a little bit more of what I call a Mondrian, right? There is rationale behind everything. It's very clear. It's very structured. There is a place for everything. Again, this is planet Earth, nothing will ever be perfect, but the closer we can get your practices to a Mondrian than a Monet, the more effective the marketing is going to be, right? So these are two different ways to market, right? The erratic way and the strategic way. I think I'll learn very quickly which I prefer. So most practices, unfortunately, do little or no research before they even open up or start doing marketing. They just see a tactic and think, let's try this. Or they go to a conference and hear some tactic that's probably not right for their practice, but they come back all jazzed up and say to their team, we're back, let's try this, right? And then they just start throwing mud at the wall, right? Marketing tactics, and more. This is not your slide book, by the way. These are new slides. So you might want to screenshot some of these if you find them helpful. But they are just doing all kinds of tactical activity with no strategy behind it. What do you think that gets you? It's going to get you very disjointed and very sporadic results, right? 1 month you might have more leads than you know what to do with. The next month, all of a sudden, you have no phone calls, right? Some of your leads, oh my gosh, where'd you come from? You're heaven sent. Then they have crazy price shoppers who are like coming there for like the free air conditioning in the reception area, right? Like it's very sporadic. They get mad, they fire a marketing company, they hire another marketing company, and the process starts itself over, and it is chaos. Have you guys ever seen a practice like that? Oh yeah. So it's not even, no, there's some really bad marketing companies in this space, but it's not even that all marketing companies are bad, they just aren't doing things in the right order or with the right thought process behind them, right? So here's what a strategic marketing plan looks like, and it's much different. Before we do anything, we want to do market research and have insight into who their patient is and who their audience is, right? We don't want to just take shots in the dark. We want to do everything from a place of knowledge and a place of intention, right? That's our first step, market research and audience insight. Once we have that in place, then we can look to really see how do we want to build a brand around this practice? How do we want to distinguish you? What marketing avenues are we going to use to attract your best patient, right? What a practice in Hollywood with a patient base of millennials is doing to market their practice, that's going to look somewhere much different than a practice in the Midwest, right, with clients in their 50s and upwards, right? So we want to have a distinguished brand and strategic marketing based on how we want to really access our ideal patient, really kind of demographic. From there, yes, we implement, and then as we implement, we want to refine it. We want to constantly be analyzing it to see what's working and what's not, and where we need to tweak things. Once we know what's working, then we can start to automate things using technology, right? We can automate certain parts of your follow-up. We can automate certain parts of the patient education process, right? And then from there, once that's working and we have great leads coming in and everything is doing what it should in a consistent way, then we can expand and enhance. We expand the ad budget, we add new marketing avenues, we really refine what's already working for us. Does this make sense? Can you see why most of your practices are not getting results from their marketing? So to build on that even further, another mistake a lot of practices make, and this is called the buyer pyramid marketing, by the way. We know only in any industry, only about 3% of web visitors are actually going to be ready to make a purchase on the spot, right? So if your practices get 100 visitors to their website in a week, only about 3 of them are going to be ready to take action that day, right? The other 97% are somewhere from the range of they're thinking about it all the way through to the range of they don't think they want it at all yet, right? So we need marketing that captures and really engages and builds a relationship with prospective patients at every phase of the life cycle, right? So I like to divide this into 3 phases. I call it awareness, consideration, and decision, right? The way we engage with patients at every phase, it's going to be different. I'm going to use the example of neurotoxin here, given my Botox purple shoes today. So in the awareness phase, someone is saying, wow, I am really fed up with these crow's feet. People are asking me if I'm tired. Like, what do I do about this? How do I get these crow's feet gone, right? So they know what their problem is, but they don't know what the solutions are yet, right? So at this phase, it's about educating them, right? Crow's feet are caused by muscle movement, right? The solution to that is a neurotoxin, right? So it's all about making them aware of what solutions exist. That's the awareness phase. The second phase of this is called consideration. So by now, this same patient, they've been browsing around, they've looked at a few doctors' websites, all of this, right? And they're saying, do I want Botox or Dysport, right? Do I go to Dr. A or Dr. B, right? So at this phase, it's really about kind of educating people and establishing the value that your practices have to offer them, right? That could be a blog post like, why is Botox superior to other neurotoxins, referencing, all the clinical research and all of this, right? It could be things like why our team is, committed to your safety with injections, right? Things that really establish the value of your practice. That's what the consideration phase is all about. Then finally, we have the decision phase. At this point, they are well aware that Botox Cosmetic is the best toxin for their needs, and they're just trying to decide, do I go to Dr. A or Dr. B? So in this phase, we really want to invite them to take the next step, right? Come to our upcoming open house, give our patient concierge a call, make a schedule online today, right? Whatever the call to action is for your practice, we really want to invite that patient to take action and begin to do business with you. So, right, most practices only focus on the decision phase and completely ignore the other two, and that's why their marketing doesn't work. They're actually leaving a lot of leads on the table. Make sense? Awesome. So just to take that one step further, kind of explain how this whole marketing cycle works, we can again think of it in 3 phases: attract, convert, and engage. So you're doing, your practices are doing a lot of marketing activity. They're doing social media. They're doing, paid ads. Maybe they have a billboard. Whatever they do, our goal is to get people to give us their contact information either through the website of that practice or by calling the front desk, right? That way, these prospects go from random onlookers to actual viable leads. That's our goal in the attraction phase. In the conversion phase, there's kind of 2 things that have to happen, right? We have to convert them twice. So the first conversion is we need them to come in for a consultation, right? The second conversion is from that consultation, we want them to actually get on the books and say yes to a treatment, right? That's the conversion phase. And then whether someone says yes to a treatment, whether they say no, or whether they want to think about it, we want to make sure that we engage them, right? So if someone says yes, and then become a patient, awesome, right? Let's engage them with a referral program. Let's engage them to, get ancillary services, cross-sell and upsell, right? Let's get them to leave us positive reviews on Google, Facebook, wherever your practices like to get reviews. Even if someone says they're not sure, that's great. We don't just want to leave them to go off to the vultures, right? We want to continue educating them about the treatment they were interested in initially. So in a month or 2 or 3 or 6 months, when they're ready, they come back to you and they come back informed because we've been educating them. And blogging and email marketing are 2 great ways to do that. Someone says, you know what, now that I know about this, not for me. No worries, right? We still want to engage them long term, so if they're looking for something else in 6, 12, 18 months, or they are talking to someone who is, your practice is still top of mind, right? An email newsletter is a really great way to do that. So again, attract, convert, and engage, right? Like I said, in this phase of it, most practices are only worried about attraction, and they kind of forget the other 2 phases. It all works together with part of the patient life cycle. Sound good? Do you see where your practices are probably leaving money on the table? Yep. Did you have a question?
Yeah.
Yes.
At the beginning, you had said that there was a survey that about 50% of the people were shopping in a crowded market based on price.
Yes.
And so how does that look then if you're trying to create a brand in your practice that maybe isn't for that price hopper, but you're saying to initially attract them, they're probably going for price only.
50% are, right? So we need to change that conversation and focus on the other prospects who are not focused on price, right? Because those 50%, those are the people who are on Groupon. We don't want price shoppers, in short. Yeah.
Right.
Unless you have a practice going with a low price, high volume model. But to answer your question, yeah, 50% do shop on price because we've become so commoditized. So we want to get your practices out of that fray, right?
Okay, so it's,
Go ahead.
So it's mentioning that.
Yes.
You don't want
Yeah, those 50%, those are the Groupon people. Those are the ones who are hard to please. Those are the ones we don't want. Yeah, I'm just sad that it's at 50%, and that's a conversation I'm trying to have industry-wide to really change that, right? People need to be shopping based on quality providers and quality of the product being used. Yeah. Is there another question back there? Any other question? Cool. Yes?
Do you think it's price because that's all that they know how to ask? That's all they know. So is it really, always price, or is it because our practices are not doing a good job mentioning themselves? So
It's both. Well, the reason the price conversation comes up, I'm going to talk about this in a few minutes, is yes, among other things, your providers aren't credentialing themselves well enough, right? If there's no compelling reason to choose a practice, what else is the patient going to go on, right? All they've got is price.
The only information attributed for a basis of comparison, right?
Yep, yep. Cool. So on that topic that we just brought up, price shoppers, let's talk about some, by the way, how long do I have time-wise? Let's be mindful. 20 minutes? I can work with that. Cool. So 3 words you want to avoid and encourage your practices to avoid in their marketing: cost, downtime, and pain, right? We want to avoid all of those words because as soon as a patient reads or hears that, they kind of just blank out and that's all they've heard and ignore everything else you say after that. So similar to this whole thing of free and discount, there's other words we can use to convey that information without triggering a patient to just kind of ignore everything else we say, right? Cost, instead of that, we can say investment or price point or procedure fee, right? Instead of downtime, we can describe that as the recovery phase or the healing process or the post-treatment phase, right? And instead of pain, we can talk about it as a sensation, or we can use discomfort sparingly. I don't love that word, but it works sometimes. Or in the case of a laser device, talk about it like the heating, right? Now, obviously, when your providers are talking about complications, you want to be very transparent up front with people. I'm just referring to this in the context as it applies to your marketing and your sales processes. So to answer your question back there, overcoming price objections. So when we're getting price objections or people are shopping on price, one of 3 things, at least, usually more than one, is happening. And that is either that the offering is not differentiated enough, the value to the patient has not been eloquently or clearly enough really relayed to them, and the patient doesn't recognize the value being offered. These are ultimately the 3 reasons that people run into price objections and that price conversation comes up. So we want to do everything possible before they come into the practice to really address these 3 things. So again, ideally, those price shoppers aren't coming through your account stores. Perfect. So remember how we talked about positioning and market segments? I want to talk more about defining your best patients. So every practice has these VIP patients we all love, and every practice has what I call learning opportunities. Those VIP patients we all love, these are the ones who do not question your pricing, they send their friends to you, they follow proper post-care so they get the results they actually want, right? They are the kind of patients that if we had a practice full of them for all of your accounts, your providers would just be over the moon, right? Then every practice has what I like to call learning opportunities, right? These are those individuals that obviously your providers are doing their best work for them, but I mean, when they walk out, if you never saw them again and your providers never saw them again, you would not be any sadder for that, right? So we want to know what unifying factors do your practice's VIP patients have in common, and the reason we want to know that is because when we have that information, we can tailor our marketing and our messaging to go for those kinds of patients. So ultimately, those learning opportunities hopefully don't come see you in the first place, while those VIP patients, when they read your ad or see your website, they say, oh my goodness, this practice gets me. Like, this is the doctor for me, right? And by the way, someone's best patient should be a little more specific than someone with wrinkles and a credit card. Just saying. So what goes into that exactly? We want to really create what we call a patient profile, or in the world of marketing at large, we call this a buyer persona, right? It's knowing everything we possibly can about your best patients, right? Like I said. Now, some practices, when I introduce this concept to them, they say, well, we don't want to exclude people out, and we want to cast a wide net. And I intuitively get why they might want to do that, but that really, in the world of marketing, does not work. So think of your marketing and your messaging and the way your practices go about doing things to attract new patients as kind of a dartboard, right? So everything your practices are doing, it should be aiming for the bullseye, right? This is our blue sky, perfect world VIP patient, right? Now, is everyone who walks through our doors going to be a reflection of that exact profile? No, this is planet Earth, right? We might get someone here, we might get someone from here, we might get someone here, we might get some crazy who walked in off the street over here, and we just don't take them, right? But ultimately, we always want to aim for that aspirational best patient, and as a result of that, the patients who come into our practice are going to display as many of those characteristics as possible. Make sense? Yes. Great. So here's what we want to consider. Demographics, right? That's obviously the important starting point. Are they single? Are they married? How old are they? What is their income range? How far from our practice do they live? We want to do our research and consider all of that. Then we want to look at activities and behaviors, right? Basically, what is going on in these patients' lives, right? Are they working? Are they stay-at-home moms? Do they have kids? Are their kids out of the house, right? What is going on in their lives? What brands are they loyal to, right? Where do they go on vacation? What kind of cars do they drive? What are they wearing in terms of clothing brands? What kind of handbags do they have? We want to know all of that because, again, we want to look outside of the aesthetic space for inspiration of the look and feel of our marketing and look towards those brands that our patients are already loyal to and already love. So we want to know about their activities and their behaviors. We want to know about their dreams and expectations, right? Not only what are they hoping to get from your treatments and your procedures, but what are they hoping to get out of life in general, right? Maybe your patients are older and their kids are gone. They're finally willing to, with the time and disposable income they have, do something for themselves, right? Maybe they're young moms who just want their bodies back, right? Maybe they are, women of a certain age who are still competitive in the marketplace and want to make sure they aren't losing opportunities because they look old and tired, right? What are your patients' dreams and expectations from the treatments you can offer them and in life in general? We want to know that. Decision criteria. Why would someone with one of your providers say yes or no to a treatment, right? Is it downtime? Are they concerned about cost? Hopefully not by the time I'm through with all of you today, right? Is it that the practice is inconveniently located for them? Are they worried people are going to know they've had something done or look that way, right? What are their decision criteria in a positive sense and why they might say no? And finally, meeting their needs. How can your accounts and your practices work with patients in a better way and in a more suitable way for their needs than other providers in your market, right? We want to include all of this in your patient profile, and you might even want to include a picture of what your aspirational best patient looks like, right? So this actually originated from the world of retail. The first time I ever saw this, I didn't even know this is what it was. I was 16 years old. I was working as a sales associate at Old Navy. And in the back room, we actually had like little posters of the different kinds of patients that came into our into the store and how we could best serve them, right? Like, this is Jenny. Jenny is a mom, and Jenny wants da 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 da. So this originated in the world of retail, and because it worked so well there, it's been extrapolated into the world of marketing at large. Marketers call it a buyer persona. At Branding MD, we call it a patient profile. Can you see how this would be helpful for your practices? Like I said, it should be more than just wrinkles in a credit card, right? We really want to get specific. Right? This is just an example of a very hypothetical profile. What are her goals? What are her challenges? What are the ways we can help her? What are some real quotes, right? I would encourage all of you to tell your providers to start listening for things you hear patients saying over and over again, right? It could be things like, oh, well, I saw this thing on the doctors, or Dr. Oz, like, is this like that? Or, I don't want to look like a TV housewife. Or, oh, well, my friend had this other thing called dice port, and it was awful. She hated it. Is this like that, right? All of that. We want to look at real quotes from your patients. And then, of course, we also want to look at, right, common objections you might be getting, right? Maybe if you have clients who are in suburban areas, they have patients that are working in the metropolitan area, and they say, well, I'm downtown every day. Why don't I just go to XYZ Med Spa there, right? So you want to look at all of this so we can address this on your website, in your blog posts, on your social media, in every facet of your marketing, right? And when I talk about marketing, like I said earlier, where do you think, what platforms would these young ladies be on? Yep. What about this gentleman? Facebook. Yep. Facebook, if even that, maybe just the newspaper and radio ads, right? He looks kind of grumpy. I should choose like a happier looking guy next time. This lovely lady, where would she be? Facebook, right? So when we know your best patients, we're actually able to really tailor your marketing budget and your marketing effort to go to the right platforms for your patients, right? I've had patients who have clients in their 50s and 60s who are on Snapchat, and I'm like, why are you spending so much time on Snapchat? Your patients aren't there, right? I'll tell you a funny story about this. Do we have any Texas in the room? No? Cool. So let me tell you, yes, a few, okay. Lovely. So we worked with a practice in Dallas, and their number one way of getting patients was radio ads, okay? Now, what radio station genre do you think got them the most patients? Christian radio. I can't make that up, right? And again, right, that's just based on who their patient base was, right? So we want to know your patient so we can target them in the right way and on the right platforms. In that particular case, it was Bibles and Botox. Who knew? So in any case, I want to give you a cool example of how this all comes to life. This is Dr. Stain. This is one of our clients we did a branding project for in Canada. She uses the Allergan portfolio exclusively, so I just love her. Let me tell you, I don't like some other products, they're not for me, right? But anyways, we actually, in doing research, came up, again, she's in a smaller town. The one concern that many of her patients had, they wanted to look better, but they didn't want to look different, right? So we actually made that her tagline, look better, not different, and display that very prominently in all of her marketing, right? We changed her logo from what it was before, this random CS thing, to this whole idea of a swan, right? A swan evolves into a swan, but it doesn't change what or who it is, right? And her first name is Mariette, Dr. Mariette Stain. So we actually changed her logo to an MS for her name and the swan to represent her messaging. Do you see how this all is very strategic and works together? Yep. Here's another example. He's not my client. Who knows Dr. Mugg in New York? Do any of you follow him? He's a big Allergan guy. This guy's cool, right? I picked the more conservative posts for this, let me tell you. There's worse. But hey, check it out, guys. He goes after a very specific market. He targets younger gay men in New York City. With that market, sex sells. So guess what? I would never advocate this for almost any other client except one going after that market in a big city like New York. It works for him. Love it or hate it, he knows his patients. If you want to laugh, you should go follow him. Again, huge Allergan portfolio advocate. So just another example. He knows who his patients are. Love it or hate it, it works for him. Dr. Mugg, NYC. Again, I've never met him. He's not my client. We message back and forth on Instagram a little bit, but he knows his market. And I already asked him, he knows he's being featured here today. He was okay with it. So again, just a few examples of where knowing your best patient can really be useful is on your website pages, talking about their conditions at a glance, right? It can be useful on your social posts, right? We really want to do this everywhere, and we want to make sure your patients feel addressed based on what their unique needs are. Very, very important activity for your marketing. So to wrap it up, I want to talk about the hot topic, social media, right? So I'm going to talk to you about this at a very high level today. I want you all to have best practices to really impart with your accounts rather than, algorithm stuff that might change in like 90 days, right? So we're going to talk about social media from a much higher level today, but still give you some really valuable insights. First and foremost, your social media and your accounts, social media platforms, they are not an order form. They are not a sales catalog, right? I cannot tell you how many practices I see where every post is, buy this now, this promotion, this open house, this, buy. Do any of you have clients whose accounts are like that on social media? It's not compelling. People drown that out, right? We need to give something a little more than that. We want to be more educational. We want to be more engaging, right? So just to let you know what's kind of happening in the bigger social media landscape, and I'm sure you're all noticing this, some former executives from Facebook have actually moved over to Instagram, and so that's why you see a lot of the features and functionalities that are really coming into play on social media on the Instagram platform are starting to make it look and feel a lot more like Facebook, right? You can obviously, you always have been able to syndicate between accounts. The one thing we're seeing is a real drive for authenticity, right? A lot of these really big influencers, the Kylie Jenners and co of the world, they're seeing less engagement and less response from their posts because people know everything they put up is basically a bought and paid for promotion, right? So we're seeing a lot better traction with what we call micro and nano influencers. Micro influencers are between 5 and 20,000. Nano influencers are generally 5,000 and under. We're seeing better results working with them. Which is also what I mentioned here. Perfect. And like I said, personalized content, right, based on regional markets. Do any of you have clients with locations in more than one city? Yeah, they might want to consider having 2 Instagram profiles for each location to make that content more local and more personalized. So another thing you want to mention is people's bios should really be quick and to the point. Again, neither of these are my clients. I just wanted to give you some general examples in the industry. We really want your bio to be very succinct. it's really a great idea to use emojis to kind of delineate the different things that practice offers and the benefits they offer. We want to make sure there's always a link in the bio so people can really get to the information they're looking for on your practices and accounts websites. Like I said, a call to action, and using those highlight areas. You might have seen those on different profiles where they can scroll through and click different story highlights. Using your Instagram profile almost as like a miniature website can be really, really valuable. Again, and discounting Dr. Mug, because that's a very unique case, but a good one of knowing your patients, I want you all to help your accounts understand there is a fine line between personal and private, right? And these two examples, I think, illustrate that so well, right? We've got this gentleman, Dr. here, Dr. Lou, what's his name again? Let me see. I don't have my glasses on today. Dr. Mike, that's the one. So he's got a great profile. He includes parts of his personal life, but it's a really good mix, right? And it's all very, very classy, right? Then we've got Dr. Dave on the right? This looks like a Tinder profile, right? Like, I'm really, really big with very few exceptions. Your provider should never be doing anything on social media that trivializes their credentials or could devalue their practice, right? Yes, that means, things that are overly, dating profile type stuff, yeah, but also anything overly political, all of that, not a good look on social media. If your accounts have private personal profiles, do whatever you want on that, but when it comes time to your business profile, you really want to err on the side of caution, right? So just helping your patients or other your accounts understand there's a difference between personal and private. Make sense? Another thing we see is the engagement on Instagram stories is really outpacing the engagement we see on the photo post, right? Between 15 and 17 times. So if your patients are telling you stuff like, ooh, we're shy behind the camera, or we don't like to do stories, all of that, that's fine, but just help them understand they are probably losing a lot of opportunity by neglecting their stories, right? Your Instagram story, and those of you who follow me would already know this, it's kind of like your own reality show, right? It really gives you an opportunity to build a relationship with your patients, kind of develop almost some storylines, right? We have a client in Florida, they do something called Better Skin Fridays every Friday, and patients know they can send their questions in all week and tune on Friday afternoons to get those answers. So really want to leverage Q&A and really great content in your stories. Blue check mark. Any of your clients have a blue check mark? Lucky them. It's pretty arbitrary how Instagram really kind of gives these out. There's no set formula. There's best practices that you can leverage. Instagram wants to see if someone tried to imitate your likeness. That's a pretty good criteria to get someone a blue check mark. If you're featured in the media, that's a pretty good way to get a blue check mark. So sometimes I get accounts that come to me and they say, can you get us a blue check mark? And I'm like, we can try, but I can't guarantee you anything. So just want to let you know what actually goes into that coveted blue check mark. How many of you have seen or have accounts that have seen people message them and say, hey, pay us $500 and we'll get you 20,000 followers in 24 hours? Have you guys seen that? This is what you are buying. So let me explain why this is such a bad idea. First of all, if Instagram catches you doing it, they can shut your profile down. Second of all, what you're paying for, isn't this creepy, right? What you're paying for is you're paying for labor in a very cheap country, probably the Philippines or India, somewhere like that. And people are literally going click, 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 like, to get you followers and likes in inorganic ways, right? So kind of what we call in the marketing world, black hat ways, right? Here's another reason that's a really bad idea. If Instagram sees that a bunch of people in the Philippines are liking your content, it's going to say, well, screw that. Why would we show this to people in North America? Let's show it to people in the Philippines. And it actually backfires, and you will actually get much lower engagement on your post, right? So creepy. Let's go to the next slide. Bad idea. Now, the only exception to that is if you were in a different industry, like say you were like an author or something trying to show you have clout, then you might want to buy followers, but in the world of medical aesthetic practices, not a great look. Hashtags are obviously really, really important. You want to use some more competitive hashtags, some less competitive hashtags. In about 5 slides, I'm going to show you a list of tools you can use to do that. So again, you want to make sure your accounts are hashtagging their posts properly. Just some things that you should know Instagram and Facebook both look at in their algorithm of determining what posts show up on your feed. There's a couple things. Engagement ratio, right? So say you have 1,000 followers, how many of those 1,000 followers are actually responding to or liking your posts? Instagram values comments more highly than it does likes because it takes more effort to type a comment than double tap a photo, right? So that's why you see people saying, like, we're having a contest, like, type the word, like, Botox, letter by letter. They're trying to get more comments to drive engagement. This is kind of creepy, but it is something to consider. Instagram actually knows how long you spend on each post as you're scrolling through. So if they see people are spending more time on your posts, they're going to rate that post more highly and give it more visibility in people's feeds. That's why in your actual static feed, the grid, that's why video posts are really great for that. Speed of engagement, right? How quickly from the time you post do people respond to it, right? There are tools. One we use is called, I'm getting all the tools confused. We use Later, and we also use Iconosquare. Iconosquare lets you see what time of day your patients are most active, so you can post at that time, because if they respond to your post within 30 seconds to 2 minutes of people posting, Instagram's going to value that more highly than like if you post something like at 9 a.m., but your patients don't look at their profile till 5, and it goes flat for 8 hours. Instagram looks at that as well, and Instagram looks how many people are actually searching out your account by name, so it looks for all of that. Just some visual inspiration, right? Think, right, in your actual stories, you can be a little more real, you can be a little more gritty, but in your actual photo feed, your practices should really think of that almost like a magazine photo spread, right? You do want to be a little more polished and staged with your visual presentation on your feed. So I just shared some examples I really, really like from different industries. This is Sugar Bear Hair, a hair vitamin that I don't think it works, but they do a great job with their social media. See how they've got like a diagonal layer of blue, pink, gray, blue, pink, gray? They have consistency there. Really, really nice, right? Go to Skincare. They do a really great job with their stories, and you see they've all got everything color branded, and they use nice little icons for their highlights to make it, like I said, almost like a mini website. Really, really cool. And then we have Benefit Canada on the left, and that's just an example of a regionally targeted profile. So just some examples of visual inspiration. Facebook, again, just to show you how much is happening on Facebook. Facebook is great for what I call the best of your best content, right? Video is really, really great on Facebook, right? That drives engagement. And we really want to make sure that wherever possible, we are putting content on Facebook that people either put love or the haha reaction to, because we've seen, based on the stats, that's what gets the most engagement. So if your doctor's something funny, classy but funny, throw it up there. That works great on Facebook. This is a laundry list of resources we use internally. Full disclosure, I'm not the one on our team who uses them, but these are tools we've used with our clients on their social media platforms to really maximize engagement, get some analytics, and really automate things. So some really great tools you might want to check out. Some are free, some are paid, some have like a free limited functionality version, but these are all great tools to use as well. Later.com is my favorite and our team's go-to for scheduling posts. Iconosquare is our go-to for Instagram analytics and reporting. For example, what did people respond the best to? What time of day are they most active? So just some really cool tools for you right there as well. Was this helpful? Did we learn something? I'm not done yet. I still got some gifts for you today. I'm no Oprah, but I'll do my best. So the first thing we have, and this is completely free, if it's useful for your key accounts, give them this URL. It's our August Marketing Academy. We're doing a month of free webinars. They can sign up at medspawebinars.com. We get started next Monday. We're talking about a lot of really cool topics, a lot of stuff I didn't have time to cover here. We're talking about marketing to the LGBT community, how we can really recession-proof your practice, how to package and procedures and treatments to really get the most profit and avoid price competition, a lot of really cool stuff. And again, it's all free of charge, so definitely have them check that out. Let you guys screenshot that, medspawebinars.com. You've all got the lovely physical copy, but we do also have, I dropped it, there it is, okay. We've also got the digital copy of my book, Now the Patient Will See You, getadamsbook.com, pretty easy to remember. Your practices can go on there, download that PDF version free of charge, and read their little hearts out. This is a really nice summary of everything we've covered today. And Adam, what do you actually do with practices? That's probably one of the most common questions I get. So we work with practices in 3 ways, depending on the price point they're willing to invest in their marketing. The first is we have a 12-week virtual training program. That's the most affordable way to work with my company. The second is if they want to bring me on board to do a workshop for their team, we can do that as well. And then we do have a limited number of engagements for practices who want actually me and my team to run their marketing for them. That's an option as well. I will say we don't work with 2 practices that are 25 miles or closer together, and I only work with 12 active accounts at a time. So whatever availability, those are an awesome option for practices that really want to take their marketing to the next level. So that's just a little bit about what we do. Thank you so much, guys. Do we have time for Q&A? Any questions, comments, blatant insults? I've heard it all. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
No questions?
No question? Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have my glasses on today, so I'm blind. Yes.
Yeah, earlier you were talking about nano versus micro. So nano represents how many people?
Generally 5,000 or less.
And you had most luck there.
Not even that there's a lot. There's obviously, depending on where you are, there might be less of them, but we see better engagement with them. People trust their content more than, a Kylie Jenner with 20 million followers. Make sense?
Yep.
And by the way, micro is between 5 and 20. Yes.
So is there used to be like a formula where you're not sales, it's not price. There should be more educational or fun things. Is there kind of a formula like?
To social media?
Yeah.
I like 70-30, 70% educational, fun, informative, 30 kind of more promotional, sales oriented.
Got it.
You got it. Yes.
Is there ever a situation when you're dealing with a practice that you are in a position to maybe defend the company in terms of our pricing? So if an account says to you, the Allergan portfolio is the most expensive, yeah, I mean, because I'm thinking we have a piece that says, what's in a vial?
Yep.
And then encompasses all the things that we do as a company to promote
Yep.
Botox cosmetics.
So obviously you would know more on the individual product and scientific level than I would, but I use this analogy. A Rolex doesn't go on sale, right? Do you know what Louis Vuitton does with their unsold merchandise? They incinerate it. They would rather burn it than put it on sale. When you have a best-in-class product, your price should reflect that. And tell your providers that, they should be practicing the same principle in their own practices, right? They should not be discounting. They're a best-in-class provider. Why would a best-in-class provider use an inferior product? I'll tell you right now, and I said this a few weeks ago in Napa Valley, when I see a practice that's going heavily promoting a competitor, if it's anything but Botox, my mind goes cheap practice. And it could be the best provider under the sun, but I would never go to them because I say if they're using second-rate products, they're probably a second-rate provider. So does that answer your question a little bit? Great. Yes. You're going to have to shout at me. I can barely see all of your lovely faces.
What's your handle on Instagram?
Adam loves branding.
Adam loves branding.
Adam loves branding. Oh, I'll go back to my slide there. Can I do that? No, I can't. But it was on my last slide. Adam loves branding.
If we see the last slide, Adam, like
I'm trying. I'll write it. Oh yeah, it's on the last little, I'll put it here too. So you'll see I don't post up to my feed like ever. I'm very, very active on my story. Again, that's where my engagement is, and I'm a strategic marketer. I don't get clients off Instagram, straight up. I get them through speaking gigs and referrals. So, but I'm a lot of fun. Follow me away. There you go. Any more questions? Awesome. Thank you guys. This was great.